This is the new Citroen C3 Aircross, and it's been given a bit of an update for 2021 to give it a leg up over rivals such as the Ford Puma and Nissan Juke. Not only does it look sharper and has kind of grown up a little bit, but we also have a bit more tech on the inside. So is now the time to buy a Citroen C3 Aircross? Well, today I'm going to try and find out. But before we go any further, why not give us a thumbs up if you like what you see and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. So let's get straight to the design, because this is actually one of the really big changes that we see on the new C3 Aircross. So the old model was actually quite rounded and bulbous. It was very friendly faced, but Citroen has tried to give its new model a bit more aggression. And I'd say the big change is it's tried to mimic the new X design language that you see on a lot of its new cars. So you now have this faux grille running along the center here, which sits below another faux grille. The only air inlet is actually down here. And you also get this cool little chrome strip that connects up the base of the Citroen logo and kind of flares out towards the edges. Now again, as I said earlier, the old car was much more rounded at the front, but you now have this kind of chiseled out section down here, which looks a little bit like a snowplow or a rally car maybe. There are new wheel designs. These are the 17s that you get on the top spec Shine Plus car. And like the old car, you also have cladding around the wheel arches and along the base of the skirts, because it screams soft-roading and lifestyle. You can also add different graphics to the rearmost window, which gives you a little bit more personalization to make your C3 Aircross, well, yours. At the back, there aren't actually that many changes. Like the old car, you still get this metal-looking skid plate at the back, which is actually just painted plastic and is just there for show. But you actually get slightly different rear lights. So in the old car, they would extend all the way into here, but on this new model, they've just added this black trim element here, which kind of tidies it all up and, again, makes the C3 Aircross look more aggressive. The C3 Aircross has a tiny bonnet, and that's quite fitting because it also has a very small engine, and that is a 1.2 litre petrol engine with 3 cylinders producing 110 horsepower in standard form, and that comes only with a 6-speed manual gearbox. Now you can get the same engine with 130 horsepower, but that one comes with an automatic, and you can't have the more powerful one with a manual, and you can't have the lower power model with an automatic. Now there's also a diesel, it's a 1.5 litre motor, and that also comes with a manual gearbox, no automatic for the diesel. Now it's a bit of a shame that there's no kind of electrified models, there's no hybrids or fully electric versions, but given its price tag, it doesn't come as a huge surprise. And how much does it all come to? Well, it's really quite cheap. The entry-level C3 Aircross comes in at £17,320 for the C Series, and above that is the Shine. That comes in at £19,890. But the top spec one is the Shine Plus, which we have here, and that is £21,500. Now with that, you get larger wheels, you also get keyless start and a reversing camera. It is worth noting, however, that the C3 Aircross does tend to depreciate quite quickly. So why not head over to YesAuto.co.uk to pick up a nearly new one, or if you want a pre-facelift, I found them costing from just a little over £10,000, which is really cheap. Now, fundamentally, the facelifted version of the C3 Aircross is the same as the pre-facelift underneath, so the 410 litre boot matches that of the older car. Now, how this stacks up against the competition, something like a Nissan Juke is a little bit bigger at around 420 litres, and the Ford Puma is a little bit smaller at about 400 litres. And I actually drove the ST version of the Puma relatively recently. You can watch my review of that by clicking the link in the top right hand corner. Now 410 litres is still very decent for a compact crossover, and you also get hooks either side of the boot to hang up some shopping, and if you go for the mid-spec or top-spec cars, you also get an adjustable boot floor to open up a little bit more space underneath. You can open up more space in the boot by sliding the rear seats forward, but if you're like me and have legs, then you're going to be cutting into the front seat. Now, speaking of space, it's a little bit tight back here. The front seat is in my position and I'm just under 6 foot, so I'm not the tallest guy in the world, but legroom is pretty tight. Headroom is definitely much better, but we had one of my colleagues in here who is 6'5" and he barely fit in at all. So I think if you were 6 foot or a little bit over, it would still be a bit of a squeeze. And while you're back here, there really isn't a lot to do. There's no armrest and there's no real chargers. The only thing we do have is a 12-volt charger, so you're gonna need an adapter unless you're using it, I don't know, to pump up your tires. The good little creature comfort that you do have though is you've got a sunblind, which is very rare in modern cars today, but still, you get it in the back of the C3 Aircross. The interior of the new C3 Aircross is largely the same as the old car, although there's one big difference, and it's this thing right here, a new 9-inch infotainment screen that replaces the 7-inch system in the old car. It's a responsive, yet really quite basic system that, if you go for a mid-spec car, comes with sat-nav, and top-spec cars also add in a reversing camera to the mix too. If you're not a fan of the system, thankfully you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto for free, which pretty much bypasses the whole infotainment suite. Another change is a slightly redesigned center console, which comes with this new concealed cubby, which adds a little bit more practicality to the C3 Aircross. Citroen is sticking with analog dials for the instrument cluster, although there is a small TFT display in the center which gives you very basic information like your speed, MPG and mileage. This car also comes with faux leather seats with contrasting grey, light grey and tan fabric, which looks and feels great, but it'll cost you £500. But I'd say the only real downside is if you go for a manual, you get this incredibly ugly and cheap feeling gear shifter. So it's more of the same on the inside of the new C3 Aircross, although I am a big fan of this new screen, even if the software itself is a little bit on the basic side. Now, there are some cheaper plastic around here on the door and in the center console, but really you're going to get the same thing on most cars competing with the new C3 Aircross. So the C3 Aircross makes a good first impression when you're sat still, but is it as good to drive as it is to sit in? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. So I'm going to start off with the engine because that's what really stood out to me when I first got in the car. So the one we have here is the 1.2 litre petrol with 110 horsepower. So it's the lower performance model, and we have the 6-speed manual gearbox. And while performance isn't terrible, you can still get a little bit of a move on when you put your foot down. It does have a 0 to 60 time of 10.1 seconds, which isn't the speediest thing in the world. And when you do put your foot down, there's sometimes a little bit of a pause for the turbo to spin up, and then you can be sent on your way. The rest of the drive is very Citroen. So the steering is, in true Citroen fashion, very light and a little bit on the vague side, but it all caters towards that more relaxed drive. But the good news is it is a comfortable car, as you would come to expect from a Citroen. So we're on a rural road at the moment with a few bumps and ridges in it, and the C3 Aircross is soaking it up really quite well. Also, one thing that I've picked up on the Aircross that I've not really noticed in a lot of cars is that there's actually a gearbox whine. I think it's a gearbox whine. So I don't know if you can hear it on my microphone, but it's a very high-pitched whine that happens when you put your foot down. It reminds me of when you're in an aeroplane and you can hear the engines kind of spooling up and down when you're coming into land, or a race car when you're driving around. So you're not really going to notice it at first, but on long journeys and you've got the cruise control on and the car starts to accelerate, you will notice the slight whistle and whine coming from what I believe is the gearbox. I don't think it's the turbo. Citroens are also really good when it comes to fuel economy. Now, this has got an official figure in the low 50s, and I'm currently sat at 41.9 41.4. That includes a relatively long stretch of motorway, but a lot of national speed limit roads in the countryside of Chichester, which is not going to be the best for your fuel economy. So 41.4 isn't too bad, but if you are going to be kind of hanging around more on main roads, you're absolutely going to be getting 50 to 55 or so. So there is a lot to like about the C3 Aircross. It does feel different on the inside compared to its rivals. Most of its rivals can be a bit generic, whereas the C3 Aircross really does feel like a comfortable and nice place to be and spend some serious time in. So if it were my money and I had to get a compact crossover, I still think something like a Ford Puma has the slight edge of being the whole package. But the C3 Aircross comes into its own when you consider that it is a seriously cheap car compared to the competition, and because it does tend to depreciate a little bit, you can save quite a bit of money by buying one on the nearly new market.